Everyone, welcome to the channel. We're going to be watching a couple of videos here, the truth about chain thrift stores. I got about probably 2 minutes into this one, and I thought it'd be a pretty good one for us to watch together, and I'll give you my my thoughts on it as well. Got some tea, and got sort of a bit of a sore throat here, so hopefully it's not too bad, the sound quality. And let me know in the comments if you can hear me. If you've got another video that you'd like me to check out, let me know. I'm gonna mute myself here on the video, and I'll just monitor the comment section, and let's get started.
Most people assume that when they shop at a thrift store or drop their clothes off for donation that they're doing a good thing, that this action is helping a charity in need. Unfortunately, that's not always the case. Now, before we get into what's happening today with thrifting, it's pretty important that we jump back.
I'll tell you what's happening with thrifting. I was at Savers probably like 3 months ago, and there was, and this has been the case for over a year, but there was self-checkout machines, and most of these places don't claim to be nonprofit or charities, but they claim to provide jobs to the local community. And I'm just curious why they think they can get away with replacing everyone with machines if that's the case. I believe Savers is going to be going public, and you can actually buy stock. Savers stock. I don't think it's called, Value Village. Or did they already go public? Oh, they already went public. So, when did they go public? 5 years? Oh, they've been public for a while. Huh, I didn't know that. 2023. Oh, no. So, yeah, it only goes back to 2023. Yeah, because last I was looking at this was like a year, probably around a year ago. Okay, so that makes sense. So we'll swing back to there.
Back a little bit to see how we got here. People have been swapping used goods with one another arguably since the beginning of time. But the thrift store as we know it couldn't have been possible without a major development: industrialization. Back in the day, the average person couldn't afford to throw money away on arbitrary fashion trends and a steady supply of new clothes. So they would often wear their clothes to tatters. Not like Yeezy, but like literally to shreds. But even then, the garment wasn't totally tossed because those tatters would be used for something else, like stuffing cushions in a couch, for example. In the previous video, we talked about how the Industrial Revolution spawned fast fashion, enabling the middle class to purchase new clothes all the friggin' time. And if you're interested in that, you should check out our video about Shein.
There's an Etsy shop, I believe, that makes clothes out of lint. Lint clothing from a dryer. Lint clothing. Let's see. ASMR Vantage. Lint. Maybe if we do like buy clothing made of lint. Possible to weave new clothes from dryer lint. Let's see. Here's some pieces. That's so gross. That one looks pretty cool. Oh no, that's how to remove lint. Fabric made from sheets of dryer. Anywho, yeah, I ran into that probably a couple months ago. Somebody who was selling clothes made of lint.
Company on planet Earth, and it's pretty depressing. Hello, darkness, my old friend. Immigrants to America were among the first to take advantage of this clothing surplus. At the end of the 19th century, Jewish immigrants in particular, who often didn't have a lot of other job options at the time, turned to going door to door collecting and selling used goods out of carts. Although there was a lot of stigma around this profession, these dealers apparently made enough money to attract another group of people to the used scene: Christian missionaries. These missionaries put two and two together. They saw the opportunity to combine capitalism with charity by raising money for the social programs they wanted to launch while simultaneously employing the underprivileged and providing desired goods to the community.
If he doesn't bring up Deseret Industries in this, I'm going to be shocked. Because they're the ones that are taking advantage of this for sure.
The Salvation Army was a pioneer for this business model and started its Salvage Brigade back in 1897. This brigade ran out of the basement of a men's shelter and provided the impoverished with food and shelter if they went around collecting used goods. Similarly, just a few years later, a Methodist preacher launched Goodwill, which hired poor and disabled persons to collect and repair goods. You're starting to see what's going on here. Now, in those early days, a lot of people still didn't want to buy used stuff. But these early organizations managed to overcome that. Having thrift stores associated with a reputable charity helped breed trust in the consumer base for this type of thing. More and more people enjoyed spending money at these stores because they felt like they were benefiting the community by doing so, and they got a little bit of shopping in on the side. Within decades, both Salvation Army and Goodwill expanded across the nation and started modeling their chains after department stores. The problem with these organizations is that they're just too good. Both of these organizations started out as small-scale charitable endeavors, and without question have provided an immense amount of service to the communities they've been a part of over the last 120 years. But they've grown almost out of control after creating such a lucrative market. Recent estimates value the secondhand market at $33 billion globally, and it's expected to get up to $77 billion by 2025. Today, Goodwill is a multi-billion
Before the pandemic, my wife and I owned a thrift store, and we were such noobs that we didn't make sure to buy a building that would have a drop off for people to bring their donations. We actually sourced all of our product and put it into the store, and it would have been so much easier for us just to have like a drop off bay and given, because people would come in and say, hey, do you guys accept donations? And we'd be like, oh, sure, okay. And they'd bring them in and drop them off. But man, that was a huge mistake that we made. That, and our store was 3 stories instead of 1. So it was really hard to keep an eye on everybody. And it was hard to stock shelves, and going up and down stairs was a pain in the butt. But yeah, like this is a really good business to be in. And I think resellers are below the total, at the bottom, underneath the Goodwills and the thrift stores. The thrift stores is where the money is really at.
$1 company with an international presence. In many ways, that could be a good thing, but the problem with this kind of money is that it tends to attract all the wrong kinds of people. Power corrupts. Within Goodwill, we've seen instances of CEOs being paid well into the 6 digits, while some employees were being paid well below the minimum wage. An obviously controversial move that was met with significant public backlash. A less talked about story is the cases where Goodwill board members were using their position to make a profit through their ties to other companies. See, even the thrift stores are getting into capitalist shenanigans. Similarly, higher-ups often benefit from Goodwill programs as well. Part of the Goodwill charity, of course, is to award scholarship money to people who need it to go to school, but
let me guess, it's going to be to their kids or their cousins. It's going to be something like that, their nephews.
Weirdly enough, some of those scholarships went straight to the children of Goodwill VPs, which seems like a problematic situation.
I swear I did not watch this video beforehand. I did not.
Now, these kinds of financial details aren't all that easy to find. Reporters have to scour through pages and pages of tax forms to find this juicy stuff. This is because, obviously, the executives have an interest in keeping their financial gains hush-hush.
Shh, we're hiding. Be quiet, everyone, including me. Shh, who's making that noise? Oh, it's me again.
And this is sadly commonplace business practices at many businesses, not just Goodwill, which sadly makes it all the more difficult to determine exactly how much of Goodwill's revenue is actually going back to the people they claim to support. With all of these complicated money loopholes taking place, it does sort of compromise the overall goal of a charity. Overall, though, Goodwill is far from the worst. Yes, it gets worse.
Ooh, is it going to be
And
DI?
what you know, it's the for-profit sector. Now, there is nothing wrong with making money, but things can get a little deceptive when it comes to thrifting. See, thrift stores have been long associated with charities, and most people assume that shopping at one benefits the community in some sort of way. In the UK, they don't even call them thrift stores, they're actually just called charity shops. Now imagine for a moment that you're a savvy business person with little to no social conscience. You see people out here in the streets just
I can imagine
giving
half of that.
clothing to these charities for free. Not even just giving it to them, delivering it to their door. And then after a quick wash, the store puts them on the shelves and sells them for 100% profit. I don't know if you went to business school, but I'm telling you right now, there is not a lot of businesses in which the cost to make your product is literally $0. And so, of course, the for-profit titans that you likely know as your local thrift stores entered the scene. Businesses like Savers rake in millions or even billions of dollars by selling free items that generally.
Which is why I am wondering why their stock is down. I guess not too much in the last year. It seems like it should be up. Because I would think people would be thrifting more as the economy starts to worsen. Anywho.
Generous souls donate to their business. And despite what their marketing efforts tried to lead you to believe, most of that money just goes straight back into their pockets. Now, they've actually gone to court over this issue in the past, and they were accused of false advertising. Wouldn't you know it? Dressing up like a charity organization while truly being all about the moolah is not a great look.
Miss Helen? The water's boiling.
Now, don't get me wrong, they do partner with charities, but sales revenue doesn't really go to these causes directly. Now, I'm going to be talking about Savers and Value Village. They are both owned by the same company, so I will be using those terms interchangeably. Basically, Savers pays charities a monthly fee to use their logo and solicit donations on their behalf. This all makes them look good on the surface and convinces shoppers that aren't privy to this information that they're doing good by purchasing stuff from Savers. But the business is essentially just taking advantage of consumers' goodwill in order to make a pretty penny. Isn't that just shisty? On top of this, as if making money off of free clothing was not enough, Value Village has started releasing their own personal brand of specialty clothing. They got like
Halloween
ugly
stuff for sure.
Christmas sweaters and Halloween costumes that come out at seasonal times of the year. But this is perfect, of course, because they're a business whose purpose is to serve the environment by inspiring a future where secondhand is second nature. Oh yay! They love the planet. With thrifting becoming increasingly popular, we expect to see more stores capitalize on this increase in demand in less than charitable ways, sadly. Already there are complaints that Goodwill has started marking up their prices, sometimes, and this is true, exceeding retail value. In response to demand created in large part by the Depop crowd, people who buy from brick and mortar thrift stores and then resell these items online at a much higher price, which you might have known if you had already watched our video about them. I want to say that you should have subscribed already, but I'm just saying if you were subscribed, you would have seen that video and then you would understand what we're talking about. So, just kidding. I felt really bad there. If you want to subscribe, that would be amazing. We make really awesome content. At least with Goodwill, some of those extra profits do go back to good causes, but you can bet some of those also goes back to the execs who have those kids who really need those scholarships. Now, you know, if you've been watching this channel for a while, that we are advocates of buying stuff secondhand, and you should do so rather than buying something brand new. But this is important stuff to know, because as we all try to do the right thing when we
If you ever get a chance, if you've never been out to a landfill, if you go, I think everybody should go to a landfill and just sit there for 3 hours and just watch the amount of stuff that comes in throughout the day. It's nonstop, and it's companies will bring in their own product that's dead product or last season's product, and they'll just dump it all out at the landfill. It is crazy how much waste we have in the U.S.
shop, more and more brands and companies are going to be fighting for your dollars. And as we have seen, they are clearly not above dressing up as something they aren't to get that sweet, sweet candy. Candy being a metaphor for money, your money. Now, in summary, please avoid the big chains. Yes, they are the easiest to find. They are everywhere all over the world, but do a little bit of legwork. Try and find something in your area that's independent. In my experience, these places are filled with really awesome and passionate people who are there for the right reasons, and your donations could actually make a difference for the organizations that they support. Hopefully this video was interesting, you gained something from it. If you like what you're seeing here, subscribe to the channel.
Yeah, there's a bunch of like one-off local thrift stores that I like to donate to. I don't like donating to the DIs, the Savers, but also because a lot of the stuff that I take to those thrift stores is stuff that's not going to be good for resellers. And resellers, at least in my area, they always, like, most of them hit up the DI and the Savers, and they don't really pay attention to these smaller local shops. So I'll drop off stuff there, and I'll run inside and check out. I usually find better stuff there for flipping because they're not as targeted by resellers. So that's it for that one. Let's check out this fast food video. Why are fast food prices up? Have not seen this one either, but I'm going to guess they're blaming laws regarding minimum wage. Well, let's find out.
Welcome to another video about a problem that is driving people absolutely insane. Today, we're talking about fast food pricing. Tell me if this has ever happened to you. You're hanging out with some friend and really craving some quick and easy food. You pull into a place like McDonald's and place a simple order. Let's say 2 Big Macs, box of chicken nuggets, 2 large fries, and 2 drinks. You arrive at the window and the cashier looks at you and says,
Hold on. Let's guess
And
this.
the cashier looks at you.
How much is it? A Big Mac, chicken nuggets, and fry? Is there a drink? I'm going to guess $7 on the Big Mac. Well, if they did it as a meal, I'm going to guess 15 plus 5. I'm going to guess it's 20 plus tax, 22.
You arrive at the window and the cashier looks at you and says, your total is $36.
No.
Now, some
California.
people would probably eat their meals and move on with their lives, but if you're like me, this interaction might get you thinking, how the was my total $36? Well, if this or something like this has...
Because you're a liar. You got a Frosty.
How the was my total 30? People would probably eat their meals and move
Oh,
on with
frappy.
their lives, but if you're like me, this interaction might get you thinking, how the was my total $36? Well, if this or something like this has happened to you, you are not alone. I'm here for you. Come here. Come on. Closer. We can get
Love your
through this
editing.
together. As a consumer, you have the right to understand why your dollar doesn't stretch as far as it used to. How did fast food, the one thing that was supposed to be affordable, become so expensive? Why did this happen? Who's to blame? What happened to the dollar menu? And what's going on with celebrity meal deals, fast food apps, and more?
When I worked at Pizza Hut growing up, Jessica Simpson did a Pizza Hut ad commercial. And I remember they were talking about how much she was paid to do that commercial, and she was only on set for 1 day. She got paid more for that commercial than the general manager that worked at that Pizza Hut would make his entire life if he worked as the general manager for that Pizza Hut. So it was pretty, I think he would have had to work for like 4 or 5 lifetimes as a general manager at a Pizza Hut to make what she made in 1 day doing a commercial for Pizza Hut. It was kind of gross, actually.
Let's dive in. In the late 1980s, fast food restaurants like Wendy's and Burger King introduced a groundbreaking idea that would forever change the industry: the dollar menu. Wendy's launched a super value meal with items priced at just 99 cents each. Soon after, Burger King followed with the 99-cent Great Taste menu, where you could get a Whopper for, no joke, 99 cents. The strategy was simple: give customers more for less. It allowed people to enjoy a variety of foods without breaking the bank. The concept was a hit, and by 2002, McDonald's introduced its own game-changing dollar menu, featuring items like the McChicken and the McValue fries, both for just $1 each. With just a few dollars, you could eat like a king. But as the years progressed, things changed. Dollar menus became value menus. Whoppers are most definitely no longer $1, and now for a few bucks, you might be lucky if you can get a single item from a fast food restaurant. And it's not just value menu items that have seen price increases. Fast food prices overall have surged dramatically, especially in recent years. According to the Consumer Price Index, fast food prices is nearly especially in.
Yeah, why is McDonald's? That is not what you would think. McDonald's has gone up more than anybody. Actual inflation, 31%. 100. And let me guess, McDonald's is just crushing it. It's just weird that they were able to renovate their stores and somehow start charging double for everything. That's crazy.
In recent years. According to the Consumer Price Index, fast food prices has nearly risen 28% from 2019 to 2023. Specifically, McDonald's has increased its prices by more than 100% over the past decade, which is 3 times the rate of inflation. And it's not just a few fast food places. Popeyes, Arby's, and even Burger King have raised prices beyond the point of inflation. If you really want to see a big difference, take a look at this menu from McDonald's in 1999 and compare it to the current menu. Look at this, it's insane. We are now at the point where prices have increased
$2.99? There is no way. $2.99? What? What year is this?
And compare it to the current menu. Look at this, it's insane. Take a look at this menu from McDonald's in 1999 and compare it to the current menu.
Crap.
Look at this, it's insane. We are now at the point where prices have increased so
That's
much
4x.
that nearly 80% of Americans say fast food is now a luxury because it's so expensive. That's right, a luxury. You heard it first here. If your significant other takes you out on a date to get fast food, that counts as a luxurious dining experience. Now sure, it's common for the prices of consumer goods to increase over time. That's how inflation works. With inflation, the cost of things like raw ingredients and transportation go up. Aside from Arizona iced teas, nearly everything eventually rises in price. But typically, these increases are gradual, nothing this drastic. So why is fast food so much more expensive past the point of inflation? Now, the obvious reason that everyone likes to point to is rising wages.
Joining me now is Fat Brands.
I don't think so at all. I mean, they've automated a lot of stuff. Prices, I mean, shouldn't the free market get to work? Shouldn't it be making things more efficient at these restaurants? Their margins should be increasing.
Brands chairman
every year.
and founder and former Fatburger CEO Andy Wiederhorn. Increasing hourly wages for fast food workers. What kind of an impact has that had on your business?
Well, someone's going to pay for it. Prices are going to go up. The wage pressure is going to drive prices up. Burgers go up by 50 cents or $1. You're going to see pizza go up. It's just expensive.
A man named Andrew Wiederhorn, a former Portland business whiz kid, now indicted in California for allegedly taking $47 million out of companies that he controlled. The indictment alleges Wiederhorn and his family used the money for their personal benefit, including private jet travel, vacations, a Rolls-Royce Phantom, other luxury automobiles, jewelry, and even a piano.
Well, someone's going to pay for it.
Many people argue that rising wages are the factor for driving up prices, but I don't think that fully paints the whole picture. For example, McDonald's workers in Denmark make more than $20 an hour, yet their Big Macs, on average, are 3 cents cheaper than in the US. So despite higher wages, their Big Macs actually cost less. If you look hard enough, you can find plenty of these.
I wonder what their marketing budget is like in Denmark, though. Yeah, I know that marketing is a huge expense.
Examples
So I wonder
across
if
the world,
it's different there.
and even in the US, where despite higher wages, prices are the same or lower. On top of all this, there have been many studies that have found that increasing the minimum wage at places like fast food restaurants or even supermarkets doesn't increase prices. The University of Washington completed a study that found despite Seattle's minimum wage hike, it didn't boost supermarket prices. So I don't really think it's fair to blame fast food price increases on rising wages. In fact, I kind of think that's a cop-out. Fast food pricing isn't limited to one variable. Multiple things have impacted pricing over the last 5 years. And I feel like I'm going crazy here because almost no one is talking about the other more significant parts of this puzzle, like companies running inefficiently, businesses blowing money on ludicrous things, and massive corporate leadership failure. For example, in 2019, Chris Kazemski became CEO of McDonald's. Unlike many of his predecessors who rose through the company ranks, Chris spent most of his career outside of McDonald's, with roles at Procter & Gamble and PepsiCo, before joining in 2015. This background is quite
So it looks like McDonald's spent $648 million on advertising in the United States alone, which was a slight increase from 2022. Yeah, I wonder what they spent. It's probably nothing in Denmark, hardly that.
unconventional for McDonald's, where leadership often comes from within. Typically, McDonald's CEOs have been individuals with a strong understanding of the company's vast network of franchisees, who are essentially individual business owners running their own operations under the McDonald's brand. When Chris took over in 2019, it stirred up controversy. He implemented major changes, including large-scale corporate rebranding and store renovations, which demanded significant capital. These changes, driven by the goal of boosting profits and strengthening the company's position for shareholders, led to the rising costs we started to see then, and we continue to see today. But where is this money going? What even is McDonald's and these fast food companies investing in? What is costing companies so much that they need to increase their prices? Well, let me introduce you to advertising.
The Chief Marketing Officer of Taco Bell, Taylor Montgomery.
Live Moss Live, how we feeling? This is the finale. Live Moss Live, how are we feeling? That's more like it. Next week in every single Taco Bell, next Thursday, go get your cheesy chicken crispinata. Oh, it's for real. One more? Behold, the Crunch Wrap. That is a Cheez-It inside.
This is like a tech demo. This is like an Apple. This is when Microsoft tries to be Apple with their presentations. This is pretty cool, though. A little X-ray with the Cheez-It.
16 times the size of a regular Cheez-It, I present to you the Cheez-It Crunch Wrap.
Anybody ever try that?
The advertising
I don't think I ever
industry is a
tried that one.
billion-dollar behemoth, and despite rising costs, companies are consistently increasing their spending in this area. Fast food is no exception. In fact, according to the reports from 2021 to 2022, fast food companies increased their social media and digital advertising budget by 75%. If these fast food giants are shelling out record sums of money, you can't tell me this has had zero effect on the consumer. And while it's true good advertising generates sales, bad advertising can hurt businesses and cut into bottom lines. And you might think, since most fast food restaurants are owned by franchisees, that they don't pay for advertising. Well, that's not really how it works. Franchisees typically contribute a portion of their sales towards corporate advertising. For example, Burger King franchisees pay 4% of their gross monthly sales for corporate advertising. McDonald's is about the same at about no more than 4%. Even Subway franchisees pay 4.5% towards corporate advertising. If advertising costs are increasing while not delivering the same expected results, prices will reflect that. Which leads me to this guy. Can we talk about how dumb fast food celebrity meal deals are? From Travis Scott to BTS to Cardi B and J Balvin, the cost of these celebrity endorsements are undoubtedly affecting the average consumer. Don't believe me? Travis Scott admitted in a Forbes 30 Under 30 that he was paid $20 million for his McDonald's special meal endorsement. $20 million. That's actually more than what the McDonald's CEO and chairman makes, which is $19.2 million a year. What's fascinating about these sponsored celebrity meals is this is a recent thing. McDonald's never used to do this. Before 2020, they only ever had one major celebrity combo meal, and it was back in 1992 with Michael Jordan, which was at limited locations in Chicago. But now it seems like every year they're shelling out millions to have some random celebrity combo meal that isn't even a good deal for the consumer. With all the celebrity meal deals McDonald's has done over the last 5 years, this is undoubtedly costing McDonald's millions. Now sure, that's just McDonald's. Not every fast food company is doing this, but many are. And over the last 10 years, McDonald's has had the highest increase in price out of any other fast food company. And now all of a sudden they're giving celebrities millions of dollars for these meal deals? I doubt that that's a coincidence. Chipotle, another brand we are familiar with.
It's just like a more involved version of what they used to pay celebrities to do commercials. I mean, they still do. Oh man, I can't find good quality of it. But earlier in the video, oh yeah, it's all 240p. Never mind, go back to this. I'll see if I can find a higher quality version of the Jessica Simpson Pizza Hut commercial.
This channel has been in the news for rising prices as well. And sure enough, they have also partnered up with celebrities and even content creators to promote their food with special meals over the last few years. Subway is another great example. Home of the original $5 footlong, they spend a boatload of money on celebrity endorsements. And guess what? They just called an emergency meeting as there are reports their sales are plummeting. Here's an idea. Stop paying celebrities millions of dollars and use those millions to offset the cost of your food. Yes, from a business standpoint, a good advertisement can definitely pay off. However, from a consumer standpoint, I'd much rather get my food cheaper, even slightly cheaper, than get a special sauce from Sweetie. But it's not just record high advertising increasing food prices. Another large driver is the way we order food. We have to talk about food apps. Companies are pouring millions of dollars in their food apps. Wendy's, for example, plans to invest $35 million this year into their mobile and digital menu experiences. Just this past year, Burger King allocated $250 million towards a royal reset, with an additional $150 million to enhancing Burger King's mobile app. And in theory, I think investing in technology for these food apps is a good idea. People want easier ways to order food, organize their coupons, and have cool reward point systems. However, we can't deny that it's coming at a cost. And I think this would be a fair trade if it was actually a fair trade. But is it just me, or do most of these apps blow? For example, says they are investing hundreds of millions of dollars in their app and digital. You can't get the meal deal now. And just like before, it's not just McDonald's. Most food apps try to present themselves as this massive place to get food savings, but only allow you to use one coupon at a time. So you have to pick and choose your tiny amount of savings. And sure, it might be a few dollars here.
So here was the Jessica Simpson ad. Again, she was paid more money than a general manager would make working for Pizza Hut for their entire life. I think this is boots are made for walking. This is the best quality I can find. And that's just what they'll do. One of these days, these bites are gonna pop right into you.
The new Cheesy Bites pizza from Pizza Hut. A pizza with 28 poppable bites, packed with melted cheese. $11.99.
Those were so crappy to make. Hated it. It was not fun. Yeah, that was back in 2013-ish, 2014, I believe. Whoa, that brought back a lot of memories.
Here and there for a single person, but that adds up for families, which is why 80% of Americans now consider this a luxury. On top of all that, these built-in reward points aren't even that good. At McDonald's, every $1 you spend, you get 100 points, which means you have to spend $60 to get a free Big Mac or a free Happy Meal. At Starbucks, $1 equals 1 star, which means, no joke, you have to spend $100 to get a free drink. At Burger King, you get 10 crowns for every dollar you spend, which means you have to spend $75 to get a free Whopper. And the kicker, finally, is for declined profits. It's pretty laughable. It's corporate negligence, if anything. As for declined profits, it's pretty laughable. It's corporate negligence, if anything. It took me weighing 30 burritos over a month, a TikTok army, numerous news articles, and a whole social media movement just to get Chipotle to acknowledge they were skimping people out on food. I don't want to hear any brand blaming customers or consumers for their failures. If you can't provide a good and consistent product at a reasonable price point, then sorry, but I'm going to think twice about giving you my business. And clearly, I'm not alone. There are plenty of others skipping out on these businesses, and it's actually leading to change. McDonald's sales fell globally for the first time in more than 3 years last month. And as I mentioned, Subway recently had an emergency meeting about their sharp decline in sales. Interestingly, some fast food and fast casual restaurants are actually using this as an opportunity. Some companies are listening to consumer complaints and lowering their prices. Chili's, for example, reported a 15% increase in their sales thanks to their new 3 for a meal promotion, which offers customers a drink, entree, and appetizer all for just $11. The concept originated because Chili's was actually tracking social media conversations and noticed that many people were frustrated by the recent rise in fast food prices. It's amazing what happens when brands actually listen to their customers. And I don't know about you, but I think the lesson here is clear. If you have a complaint, don't be afraid to voice it. If you're noticing fast food prices are skyrocketing, consider checking out local restaurants or even cooking at home more often. A year ago, I lived in Tampa, Florida, and during that time, I didn't eat at McDonald's once. There were a few reasons for that, but primarily because there were so many good local restaurants around there that I really didn't want to eat fast food. But when I moved back to PA last fall, not gonna lie, I was craving it one day, so I pulled into McDonald's, saw their prices, and I'm not kidding, I pulled off. Many people have done the same, and sure enough, McDonald's is feeling that impact. So yes, your voice matters, no matter how small. But that's everything you need to know about this fast food pricing situation. Hopefully I was able to shine a light on everything.
Okay, so that was pretty interesting with the Subway. Let's see here. Subway called an emergency meeting. Subway has called a hasty meeting with franchisees of its 19,000 North American sandwich shops as they grapple with faltering sales and profits. The fast food giant, which sold itself in April for $9 billion to Roque Capital, owner of Dunkin', Arby's, and Baskin-Robbins, told franchisees it will reveal plans to improve traffic and win back market share at the Thursday meeting. This conference is essential, Subway said to the invites. Okay. Do we have numbers? Like, I want to know how bad the sales are down. Is it 5%, 10%, 15%? The confab, which one franchisee called an emergency meeting, noting that the invite was only mailed out last week, will include a recap of promotional offers that are being tested in restaurants. There is no emergency virtual conferences, Subway spokesperson. We consistently and proactively communicate with our franchisees to share business updates and plans. Okay, here we go. A Subway franchisee with nearly 20 stores told the Post his same-store sales are down 5 to 10% in recent weeks compared to the prior year. Ooh. Yeah, that is really bad. That is really bad, especially when your margins are razor thin with most, 99% of restaurants. I mean, this isn't In-N-Out Burger or Chick-fil-A. Oh, that's crazy. He blames the chain's recent price promotions as customers' traffic has dropped. They're doing crazy coupons. Yeah, well, that's the problem, though. It's like, are you going to give people coupons so that they come in and actually buy stuff or not? Yeah, I wouldn't blame the coupons. Coupons are just, for one, coupons, they only certain people use coupons. And I don't think that people would go to Subway. The people that use coupons, I don't think that they necessarily would have gone to Subway and paid full price without it. Our gross sales are not even at 2012 levels, and profit then was 5 times what it is today. Oh, yeah, I totally believe this. 5 times, yeah. Except there's got to be a contract where he's not even allowed to be talking about all this. His franchise, he's breaking his franchise. He's probably gonna be forced to sell. It's probably what he wants. So it does not give its franchisees national sales information, but an eastern U.S. region with about 1,000 Subways saw average weekly same-store sales slip by 8.7. Oh my God. Between June 25th and July 16th compared to a year earlier, according to data shared with the Post. Subway's meeting seems very unusual, said restaurant consultant John Gordon, who noted that he recently had seen Subway sales numbers in West Coast and East Coast regions that show same-store sales. We cleaned out a storage unit that was huge, massive, like multiple. There was like 3 of them, and they're the 30 by 30 ones, and it had all Subway equipment stuff in it. Actually, we didn't end up cleaning this out, but the owner, I talked to the owner's son. He had said that they were getting rid of all this stuff because they're losing money at the stores, and they're wasting a ton of money on paying the monthly storage fees for old equipment that they're probably never going to need or use. But yeah, that was about a year ago, so they must have already been hurting. In Southern California suburbs, they are off 2 to 5%, the source said. That's versus last year when Subway boasted that its North American same-store sales were up 5.9. Jeez. Subway is discounting its best-selling items, so it's hard for it to compensate for the lost revenue, sources said. The hope was the new 3-foot-long... I'm not a franchisee. I don't run a restaurant chain, but I think they need to focus on upsells. They need to train every single employee there that does the checkout to ask, do you want a cookie? Here's some fresh baked cookies. You want to throw in a Powerade or a drink with that every single time? They almost need like a hidden shopper that'll test them to make sure that they're asking every single time. Because when I go into Subway, I don't get asked every single time. I don't get asked if I want chips do you want to get some chips? Do you want to get the new raspberry chocolate cookies? They just came out of the oven. They're nice and warm. Like, they can turn sales around. This is the reality. If you were to train your artists to be sales reps and teach them how to sell better, that's what I would do if I owned a bunch of Subways. Is I would have a huge focus on, let's increase the average ticket price, and maybe there'll be a bonus involved if there's an average ticket price. Because that's the other thing, is when you're ringing up somebody, it should attribute the sales to you. So it should show whether or not you're ringing up extra cookies or drinks more often than, let's say, the employee next to you. Subway last year had more success when offering sidekicks, foot-long cookies, pretzels, and churros, which helped fuel positive same-store sales despite a 1.7% traffic drop. But the buzz surrounding that snack offering has died off, according to Gordon. Oh yeah. Subway, which owns none of its restaurants and makes its money through an 8% royalty fee it collects from franchisees, now faces interest payments on debt following its sale to Roark, and can't afford to have declining earnings. Ooh. And then there's just a random picture of McDonald's sign. Ooh, Taco Bell's up 5%. That's good. Wendy's and Burger King in the second quarter were flat. I'm surprised they're flat, especially Burger King. I'm surprised they're even flat. I thought they'd be down. McDonald's is extending its $5 value meal in October. Interesting. All right, one last video for tonight. Here we go. This one is going to be super interesting.
I don't think professional wrestling is fake.
What the fuck are you saying?
Well, okay, let's talk about this.
In November of 1957, a wrestling exhibition at Madison Square Garden took a violent turn. It was the final bout of the night, a tag team match featuring 4 of the most popular wrestlers of the time. The crowd favorite was Antonino Rocca, an Italian known for his acrobatic maneuvers.
Handstand head scissor by Antonino Rocca.
By the end of the night, Rocca and his partner emerged victorious, but after the bell, they went looking for revenge. As the New York Times reported the next day, this kind of thing happened all the time at wrestling shows. But it got out of hand. Rocca grabbed Dr. Jerry Graham and busted his head open on a ring post. The moment the crowd saw the blood hit the mat, they went crazy. Hundreds of fans began throwing bottles and wooden chairs. Some even tried to storm the ring and join the fight. The 33 policemen staffed at the Garden that night were no match for the nearly 13,000 fans in attendance. The ensuing riot left 2 officers injured and thousands of dollars of damage. At a hearing 3 days later, a fan blamed the referee for letting things go sideways. Here's the thing. By 1957, wrestling had long been a fictional sport, and even though the wrestlers maintained strict kayfabe, the audience mostly knew it. Maybe it was the sight of their champion engaged in righteous retribution, maybe it was the madness of crowds, but somehow a switch flipped that night, and simulated violence spilled over into reality.
There is a story here that wends its way from 1945 into the present of how we moved so quickly into madness on both left and right, sort of the upgraded secret history of modern America. And that has to do with economics, geopolitics. The problem is that this isn't a story that I think most people know, and instead they're content to be subservient to this story because they don't know it and they are actors in it.
This is part 2 of 3 in a series about Eric Weinstein and his ideas about growth, stagnation, and
kayfabe, the system of stratified lies that professional wrestling is undergirded by.
Here's a link to part 1 in case you missed it. The question we're trying.
So part 1, I have seen part 1, and that essentially is just talking about how kayfabe became exists in everything, in business and politics, and how there's truth and untruth to pretty much everything. Just a little straight. And then he gives examples. But this second video is what we're interested in.
Is how we got from here to here. Not to any one candidate or set of ideas, but to an entire political system built on fakery. A system like the one in professional wrestling. The story we're going to tell has 2 poles, 2 themes that are worth keeping in the back of your mind as things progress.
Growth on the one hand and violence on the other.
It starts near the end of World War II. With the atomic bomb around the corner, the great powers realized that the best way to prevent conflict in the future was to create a huge amount of economic interdependence among nations. So they created a new international monetary system, along with a slew of new institutions, all with the goal of creating peace and prosperity in the post-war world.
At Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, delegates from 44 allied and associate countries arrived for the opening of the United Nations Monetary and Financial Conference.
And for the most part, it worked. Heading into the 1950s, the U.S. entered a so-called golden age of capitalism.
We had incredible growth. It was very consistent. It was technologically led. It was broadly distributed.
For the rising baby boom generation, the spirit of innovation was in the air. And so too was the spirit of fantasy. This was the age of Disneyland and advertising, of LSD and cosmic consciousness. But
if you've seen some of my older videos, they're not that old, but I have aviation and space travel magazines from this time period, and the way that they write in them is incredible. Like it's like they're talking to an entire room of physicists, but they're just regular papers that anybody could buy. Super, super detailed stuff. It was really cool.
Not everyone was convinced. In a book published in 1962, the historian Daniel Boorstin warned that Americans suffered from extravagant expectations. By expecting too much of reality, he said, we were creating demand for illusions to deceive ourselves. We risk being the first people in history, Boorstin wrote, to make their illusions so vivid, so persuasive, so realistic, that they can live in them. Boorstin's warning was dire and prescient, but for a generation that would witness a man on the moon, no fantasy felt too extravagant. And then something happened. It wasn't entirely...
Yeah, that point is so crucial. The way that kids grow up nowadays, it seems like, at least with my kids, they don't think the future is going to be crazy, awesome, and amazing. But can you imagine being a kid and landing on the moon for the first time? I mean, you would totally believe that we'd be living on Mars by now.
It wasn't entirely clear just what had happened, but if you look at graphs from the time, something clearly changed. GDP continues to rise, but starting around 1971, a bunch of other metrics of economic progress start to go haywire. There's actually an entire website dedicated to capturing these graphs. I'll put a link in the description below. The starkest example is probably this one, GDP versus median male income. After growing in lockstep with GDP for decades, income starts to flatline, and it stays virtually stagnant for the next 40 years. So what was it? What changed? There are a lot of theories, and so much was happening around this time that untangling the causality is really tough. If you want to dive deeper into this, I'll put more links in the description. Incidentally, the folks who made the WTF 1971 site are from the Bitcoin community. They believe that this all stems from the collapse of the Bretton Woods system and the end of the gold standard.
Forget all that for the moment. Here's a different theory you haven't heard, so it's at least worthy of your time.
In the late 1950s, a physicist named Derek DeSola Price began to study how science and technology were progressing. He did something relatively new for the time, applying quantitative scientific methods to the history of science itself. In 1961, he published his findings in a book called Science Since Babylon, and what he shared was pretty shocking. Take a look at this graph of the number of physics papers published since 1900. Other than a brief slowdown during World War II, it almost exactly follows an exponential curve. You can see the exact same thing on this graph of the number of people employed in electrical manufacturing. And this was true for everything. New PhDs, new journals founded. Since the time of the Industrial Revolution, all these different metrics of scientific and technological progress that Price measured had been growing exponentially. And I don't mean like a lot, I mean literally exponentially.
Then bam, we just explode, and we keep exploding in an ever...
Khan Academy!
But there's a massive problem here, and Price recognized it in his book. He warned that if the current rate of growth continued, there'd be dozens of scientists per man, woman, child, and dog of the world population, and a manpower shortage before the passage of another century. In essence, Price discovered that the entire process of the scientific and industrial revolutions was headed for diminishing returns, and that the growth to which we'd become accustomed during the past few centuries was, quote, not a permanent feature of our world.
And if science is the original seed corn, if you will, of technology and technology of economics, then effectively what's going to happen in science is going to percolate through a chain through technology and into the economy with a potential stagnation coming.
And I believe that the Derek DeSola Price breaking of that trend happens in the late 60s, early 70s, and the growth pattern of the United States changes.
To understand why this stagnation is such a problem, you have to understand that during this period from 1945 to 1971, growth became an expectation, not just psychologically, but in the very structure of our institutions. Weinstein has a term for these built-in expectations. He calls them
egos, that is, embedded growth obligations.
That is the central unifying idea that I have as to why so much has changed so seriously.
Hey chat, those watching, if you got another video that you want me to check out, go ahead and let me know. Just throw in the title of the video and we'll check that out after this one.
Seriously.
Here's the idea. Imagine a law firm with a certain number of partners. Each of these partners has beneath them a certain number of associates, most of whom hope to become partners. They've all invested tons of time and money in a very specialized education with that promise in mind. As long as the firm continues to grow at an appreciable rate, that promise can be kept. But the moment growth slows or stagnates, things start looking like a pyramid scheme very quickly. This is the embedded growth obligation for the law firm.
An embedded growth obligation is how fast a structure has to grow in order to maintain its honest positions.
Because when it becomes a Ponzi scheme, it will have to be headed by somebody who is willing to lie to new entrants about the nature of that scheme.
These embedded growth obligations show up everywhere. In academic research, in corporate hierarchies, in pension plans. And because so many of them were entrenched during the post-war era, when progress in science and tech were still on an exponential curve, they expect a rate of growth that doesn't exist anymore.
If you believe that 1945 to 1971-73 is normal, you built your organization with the idea that it would always grow.
In effect, we built an entire economy on Borston's extravagant expectations. And then the engine for meeting those expectations gave out.
I came to understand that there was a big story that was going to affect everything that I cared about. It was going to affect the markets, it was going to affect our families, and that story is the story of what happens when humans get addicted to high levels of broadly distributed, stable, technology-led growth, and then are denied the ability to continue on that path. That means that you're set up potentially for war, for civil unrest.
Okay, things are getting pretty intense, so I want to take a second here and go back to where we started. In the first video, we talked about K-fabrication, the process by which pro wrestling transitioned from a real sport into the simulated spectacle it is today.
So what I call K-fabrication is the transition of something that usually has twin attributes, is very dangerous and very boring.
Traditional wrestling was too boring and too dangerous to be made into a mass audience attraction. So, to deliver a more dependable product, promoters began to fictionalize it. But according to Weinstein, this kind of transition from failed reality to successful fakery isn't unique to wrestling. Rather, it arises wherever there's a need to entertain a mass audience while protecting participants from the upheavals of real competition.
In order to routinize these things, we create kayfabe.
And this is what makes wrestling such a helpful analogy for what happened to our economy and, by extension, our politics over the last half-century. After the stagnation of the early 70s, the economy could no longer deliver on our extravagant expectations. But because of embedded growth in the 20th century, we began spinning fictions.
You start doping reality with fakeness.
These fictions weren't exactly lies, at least not at the beginning. They were more like exaggerations, or as Weinstein calls them, gimmicks.
It has to do with the layering of nonsense and reality.
But without innovation, none of these stories could deliver the kind of broadly distributed growth that Americans had come to expect. As a result, they all mask some kind of wealth transfer, from one group to another.
In general, the idealism of every age is the cover story of its thefts.
The first idealism came in the early 1980s with Ronald Reagan. Reagan was a movie star turned California governor turned president, a former Democrat sold on the doctrines of free market economics. Just the man to sell America on a bold new story about how to restart growth. His idealism was about competitiveness. The story said that by cutting taxes, decreasing regulation, and tightening our belts, we'd be able to get the economy going again. During Reagan's early days in office, his conviction was put to the test. On August 3, 1981, the Air Traffic Controllers Union went on strike, citing safety concerns and insufficient pay. On August 5th, Reagan broke the strike and fired more than 11,000 workers.
I must tell those who failed to report for duty this morning, they are in violation of the law.
Oh,
and if they
jeez.
do not report for work within 48 hours, they have forfeited their jobs and will be terminated. End of statement.
Free
The move
country.
set a precedent that empowered leaders of major companies to replace workers rather than negotiating with unions, all in the name of competitiveness and fiscal responsibility.
Management is saying, and some labor leaders are agreeing, that strikes and confrontation are universally damaging. But what is needed now in the face of foreign competition and a devalued dollar is a new strategy based more on cooperation and mutuality of interest.
Organized labor never recovered.
In fact, Reagan's actions, say labor experts, has legitimized anti-union tactics that had been considered unacceptable since World War II.
Over the course of Reagan's presidency, GDP growth increased, but without the bargaining power of unions, working-class wages continued to decline. With the fall of the Berlin Wall and the end of the Cold War, a new idealism came on the scene.
Oh no.
The idealism of globalization celebrated free trade, immigration, and philanthropy. Agreements like NAFTA and technologies like the internet helped open the US economy to the rest of the world. Culturally, elites began to think of themselves as global citizens and to espouse the virtues of multiculturalism and diversity.
Oh no.
But along with this growing sympathy for the rest of the world came indifference toward Middle America, the very place where globalization's downsides were felt most severely. By weakening bonds of national loyalty, ideals about helping the world rationalized sending jobs overseas or importing cheap labor from abroad. In this way, the idealistic story of globalization dismissed the suffering of globalization's losers.
It used to be the case that with a high school degree, you could get a good job. You could get a
Does it
a
sound
job
too
with
loud?
benefits. You could get a job that was stable, that you had job security. And the fact that these jobs are gone and they're not coming back anytime soon leads people to despair.
As we'll see in part 3, these two idealisms, competitiveness and globalization, help set the stage for our politics today. The destruction of organized labor ultimately led the Democrats to seek a substitute constituency in the form of organized identity. And the fallout
And
of
immigration.
globalization gave us the economic nationalism of Steve Bannon and the rise of Donald Trump. Meanwhile, the increasing insulation of elites, both left and right, in kayfabe worlds of their own making, sowed the seeds of populist revolt, and eventually gave rise to new kinds of fantasy politics, even less tethered to reality. Alright, if you've made it this far, you're probably wondering whether these complex issues of politics and culture really come down to economics, much less the science stagnation in the early 70s. No doubt there's a lot more that could be said here, and no single story is going to capture it all. But it helps to come back to this basic dynamic.
Growth and progress on the one hand, and violence on the other.
And when you lose growth, only growth that's left is not from growing the pie, but from eyeing your neighbor's slice.
It's easy to forget that for much of human history, violent competition over scarce resources was the norm. A high rate of growth is one of the best tools we have to resolve disagreements peacefully. But since the end of World War II, we've been living a kind of paradox. The last 75 years have been the most peaceful ever recorded, but the potential for violent catastrophe has never been greater. We've coped with this paradox through fantasy, which both heightens everyday reality and distracts from the dangers behind it.
We live in peace, secure in the knowledge that we are free from aggression and war.
First, in the 1950s and 60s, high levels of growth supported a kind of retreat into fantasy. Then, in the decades that followed, fantasy would prop up the illusion of growth. But the trouble with layering fantasy and reality, that is, the trouble with kayfabe, is that they can't stay separate forever.
Their customers are freaked out, waiting to see how low the Dow will go.
Reality has a way of impinging on the fantasy world, and fantasy tends to spill over into reality. Before too long, the violence that kayfabe was meant to banish comes back.
And I think what we've had is an incredible run of luck. And I think it's the most magical and marvelous thing, but I don't believe that we can count on luck forever.
I believe we're in a revolution, as you know. I've called it the no-name revolution or N-squared revolution. I think waiting for this to be called a civil war is not smart.
All right, if anybody has a video that we should check out next, let me know in the comments. Otherwise, I'm going to call this one. Just wait a few seconds here. Yeah, that one was not a lot of talking on that one for me, just because the whole thing is so fascinating. Just wow. Pretty crazy. Check out part 1 from Frame Problems. Frame Problems. We could start to watch part 1. Yeah, we could watch part 1 if you want. And if you come up with another video
System of stratifying.
in the meantime, let me know.
This is one of the biggest moments in recent wrestling history. It's the main event of WWE's Monday Night Raw, and John Cena is facing off against R-Truth in a much-anticipated match. Cena's about to finish things off when another wrestler, CM Punk, rushes in and interferes, costing him the victory. Last-minute reversals like these are par for the course in pro wrestling, but the reason fans haven't forgotten this moment is what comes next. Punk takes the mic, sits down on the entrance ramp, and proceeds to deliver a monologue about all his grievances with pro wrestling.
Oops, I'm breaking the fourth wall.
And he doesn't just stop at his scripted feud with Cena. He goes after Hulk Hogan and...
I'm going to call this good because we're at over an hour. Go ahead and check out this video, How Politics Became Pro Wrestling Part 1, to watch the rest of it. Super fascinating video. And I will see